How's it going, everyone? It's Badger here, and we got a smoking gun for you. The first of many, because people are coming out. They're giving their stories. This article from this WGA writer basically confirms everything we've been talking about for the last couple years. Everything we've said, who they hire, why they hire him, why all the characters are race swapped or gender swapped or sexuality swapped, why messaging is first, why it's so heavy handed, why everyone seems so experienced. And that's because they're inexperienced. So here we have a veteran screenwriter from the WGA, his open letter. This is a film threat. By all means, go check them out. Chris Gore and Alan Ing. An open letter from a white writer to the film and TV business. His skin color is important, unfortunately, because it's the reason he and many other people are being discriminated against in the name of counteracting discrimination. Here we go. An open letter from a white writer to the film and TV business. For the last 20 years, I have been a working professional screenwriter. Between 2004 and 2018, I was sent on hundreds of meetings with some of the best studio executives, producers, and directors in the business. I loved it. It was an opportunity to chat with like minded people who love film, grew up with movies, and were making them at the highest level. We'd discuss ideas, plot characters, and their arcs, and who's the audience. Maybe chat about subtext and themes. It felt like an episode of Jon Favreau's Dinner for Five. Sometimes you would end up getting work, other times you made a great connection. Everyone was intelligent, film and TV savvy, and had a deep understanding of the business side of the industry. Then in 2019, things started to change and quickly. And here, of course, we have their new search criteria showing sexuality or ethnicity, which really this is just a discrimination survey. Suddenly, subtext and themes became the main plot point of discussing a project or IP. The first question in every meeting became, what can we say with this project? Or what can we teach people with this story? Plot, character, and audience were now secondary and sometimes not even discussed. And that, if nothing else from this article, should be the takeaway that plot, character, and audience were a distant thought to them and sometimes not a fucking thought at all. Continuing. These new execs weren't savvy and business minded executives. They were young, with no track record or comprehension of the bottom line. When the streaming wars started and the money hose was turned on, those experienced executives started relying on these young guns to pick up the slack. But the kids were less focused on the hero's journey and more concerned with taking down the patriarchy, which leads us to the next point. The reality is that for the past 5 years, white, straight male writers and directors with experience and successful track records have been sidelined. We talk about it over coffee or after screenings. We've essentially been told that because of our race and gender, we need not apply. At one point, my agent told me that they couldn't put me up for any OWAs, which is an open writing assignment, or TV staffing jobs because the executives only wanted to hear takes on the material from BIPOC or female or LGBTQ or God, if you're all three of those. Some shows even starting insinuating instituting rather staffing quotas that 40 to 50% of the writing staff had to be people of color. Continue here in the next page. I know many showrunners who hate this, not because they didn't want to hire new writers and foster them. They didn't want half their staff coming from a pool of young, inexperienced writers who knew nothing about working in a writer's room, production, post, or deadline. Yes, I understand if you were like, yeah, there's too many white writers, put more people of color. But why there were no experienced, they all had to be 20 somethings? That's the one that's confusing to me, but maybe that'll be covered in another league. Um, is this illegal? Probably, but hey, I'm not attorney. And there's no way to find out anyway, because if you ask any questions about this, you'll be labeled a racist or called out for your white male privilege. If you so much as raise an eyebrow, there's a risk you'll never work again. And that's obviously what this is anonymous. This may not be obvious at first glance. There sure seem to be a lot of white dudes at the Golden Globes, right? Well, this doesn't impact the top 2% of writers, showrunners, and directors, since they're in the rarefied air where they get work no matter what. It's those of us with decades of experience working on some of your favorite TV shows and films that are now sitting on the sidelines waiting. No institution reinforces this more than the WGA. One glance at their monthly calendar of events shows a Latinx writers committee meeting, an LGBTQ writers meeting, a committee of Black writers, a Middle Eastern writers committee meeting, a women's writers committee meeting, and an Asian American writers committee meeting, to name a few. Yeah, could you fuck? Oh, he says it good. Could you imagine if there was a white writers committee meeting? We would be murdered. And the saddest part of all of this is that most of the people who would fill that room are some of the most liberal people I know, people who have gone out of their way to foster new and that's the problem here. These so-called people that and I say so-called people because I don't really think they're human when it comes right down to it. They do this under the guise of fairness and equality and voices, but then they essentially use the same horrible, disgusting tactics that the actual racists use. And it turns, instead of balance and lifting voices, to suppressing voices and this weird, like, revenge. It's very, very, very creepy. Check out the WGA's own 2022 Inclusion and Equity Report and make your own conclusions on the WGA's priorities on this list. When creating a writer's profile on the WGA website, there is one box to check if you're heterosexual, three choices under transgendered, and six under LGBTQ. Not sure what those statistics have to do with writing a great episode of The Witcher. Well, since they made every character all the sexualities under the sun, that's your answer. This mindset was very present at the last in-house WGA meeting held before the strike of 2023. Every 3 years before we have a new deal and with the studios, the negotiating committee sits on a stage and members throw their complaints at them. And God bless them. They sit there for hours on end listening to a bunch of writers bitch and moan, like he's doing. The complaints at these meetings over the last 2 decades are always the same. How do we get more money? More residuals. In 2023, the meeting had a decidedly different tone. Very few complaints had to do with money this time. There was a litany of complaints about not enough diversity in the ranks. Young writers asking, how come I've worked for 2 years as a TV writer and I'm not a showrunner yet? Which, again, is a position that should take at least a decade of experience, if not two, to reach. How do we make sure that the guild will fight for staffing requirements? I always thought that to survive in this business, it's a yearly, monthly, daily hustle. There are no guarantees, especially when it comes to staffing on a TV show or having a YouTube channel. Existential crisis. What I took away from that night is that these young Turks think working in film and TV is just a fun thing that anyone can do, and they can use this opportunity to put their stamp on the world. Can you blame them? It was easy to get there, especially when talent takes backseat to fitting a quota. Why worry? The showrunner and their number one, who is the most experienced writer or producer outside of the showrunner and the number one will pick up the slack and more than likely finish your insipid work. They can't complain about that episode you turned in late or didn't turn in at all, or they'll be called racist or a bigot or something else when they get a call from HR. It's just easier to shut up and run cover for these kids who aren't ready for the big time. The blame for this mess is threefold. Good, name names. The blame for this mess is threefold. Young creative executives with no understanding of the business or what audiences want gained too much influence during the streaming wars. They also took it upon themselves to lead the charge in reinterpreting IP. Rings of Power, The Witcher, Halo, changing successful comic books, novels, and remakes into projects that had something to say, not entertain. And that's, again, I think that what their version of my version of woke is. Anytime you put agenda over story and character, their version of woke is anytime you're preaching instead of telling a story. This also, to lead the charge, change the IPs. Why even bother with IP if you don't respect the source material? Yeah, because it's the juice they need. No one cares about their shit, so they take something people care about and gets them to listen, and they corrupt it. The WGA followed their lead and threw a huge part of their own membership under the bus in a race to bring in new members. And lastly, this new class of writers who weren't ready to so who's to blame? These young fucking executives, the WGA, who too quickly brought in new writers, and then those new writers themselves. They just weren't ready. The WGA, yeah, it's like that. What happens next? And what happens next is anyone's guess. TV is contracting. There were 600 TV shows in the last year, and now, from what he hears, there are only going to be 300. And this is what we heard from Gary. Everything has been cut in half. So many things got canceled because of that strike. It is going to be a very slim year across the board. Here you go. So let's start having those old school meetings again, the ones where you talk about story and characters and what the audience wants. And let's go back to hiring the best writers, the ones with the skill set and creativity, not just the ones with the right skin color or sexual preference. Now, that is from a writer of the WGA. I know more people will be contacting Film Threat. By all means, go to Film Threat. I will link them in the channel. So there it is, folks. That's the smoking gun. What do you think about that article? Does this ring true to you? Does this help to understand a little bit of why you keep seeing horrible writing? It's because young, blinded executives have hired young, inexperienced writers and cast out all the experienced ones. Let me know, please. Like, share, and subscribe. If you've done that, thank you. If you're going to do that, thank you. We will see you on the next one.